Greetings, Canadian Awareness family. Welcome to another episode of Canadian Awareness Podcast right here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My name is Anthony. I'm an extra dimensional channeler. And tonight I have a very special person here, someone that I've actually met long time ago, approximately 1984. Tonight's guest is an American Olympian, a gold medalist in speed skating, and United States Olympics Hall of Famer as well. He's someone I've watched live with my family in 1984 Olympics, Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, and then fast forward in 1996 when I immigrated to Canada. I was casted by a movie casting agency, an acting agency, to play a very small acting part in a movie depicting this gentleman's life, this entire story that he brings forward, his overall life story, a very interesting life story. And now with us here tonight is this gentleman speaking to us live from North Carolina, who's originally from Wisconsin. And he, in my opinion, is the greatest skater of 500 meters of all time, and he's been called that by many of his own competitors. This gentleman's name is Dan Jansen. He's speaking to us tonight about his perspectives on the sports and his perspectives on human empowerment and his wonderful sister and many other things, many other of his accomplishments. And I look forward to asking him many different questions. And by the way, this is someone that competed at 18 at his first Olympics. And then his career took him to another Olympics in Calgary in 1988, and then another Olympics in France in 1992, and eventually to Norway in 1994 to Winter Olympics, where he won his gold medal. And one of the things, too, that Dan is known for is a tragic event that took place in 1988, literally just hours before his competition at the 1988 Winter Olympics. As that, his parents, his families called him from the United States while he was in Europe and let him know that his sister, Jane, has passed away at age 27 of leukemia. But he still was a lion, a fighter, and he proceeded to compete. Another thing about Dan is that he's a Hall of Famer. In 2004, he became United States Hall of Fame, and he also then eventually later became a commentator for NBC. He has Dan Jansen Foundation, which is a foundation that fights the leukemia and cancer in a way of helping many different people. And there was a movie made based on his life, which I was part of, Dan Jansen's story, The Brother's Promise. So without any further delay or ado, I wish to bring in Dan Jansen into the studio, who's not just a pro skater, but is also a very passionate golfer from my understanding. Dan Jansen, everyone. And now in the studio with us, I have finally Dan Jansen. Mr. Jansen, welcome to the show, Canadian Awareness Podcast, right here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. How are you this morning?
Thanks, Anthony. I'm great, thanks. Good to be here. It's a beautiful Friday morning here in North Carolina. So, yeah, all is well.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you being here. And I figured before we even got to talk, I want to make you laugh right away. So that you know I'm a pretty funny guy. I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to want to see if you laugh or not, and perhaps if you remember. I have something that's extremely ancient in my possession.
Vuchko, right? Is that right? From
It
Sarajevo?
is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. This is a souvenir from 1984, and for the Olympics, and for the audience, even though it is in the description of this video, Dan Jansen obviously is a professional speed skater, an Olympian, a gold medalist. And the very first time I've ever heard of Dan was in 1984 Olympics. And my family and I got in a car and we traveled all around to get a hotel room because it was extremely busy, and traveled to all of these different sites in Sarajevo to look at all of the competitions. Dan competed. He was extremely young at that time. I believe that your age was 15, 16.
Actually, I was 18, but still very young. Yeah.
Very young. That takes courage to do that, to go internationally as a young boy. And he basically competed in Sarajevo. He ended up placing, I believe, fourth. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. And then fast forwarding and later on to 1996, when I immigrated to Canada, there was an acting job that was advertised. And I wanted to be an actor for a long time. So I applied with this agency, and I got a part as a very tiny little part as one of Dan's cousins that was supposed to be celebrating Dan's win in the movie called The Brother's Story, the Dan Jansen story. It was filmed in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, Toronto, Canada, Brampton, and a couple other places across the United States. And I have that clip, by the way, Dan. I'd like to show it to you just to make you laugh, too. And then eventually now here today I'm with Dan. So it's very interesting how life circles everything around and brings humans that are not even aware of each other into the same environment, whether it's virtual, whether it's physical. So I always found this story to be very interesting. I was sharing it the other day. I said, "You're not going to believe who I'm going to be talking to Friday." I said, "It's Dan Jansen. Here's how I got to know him. Here, this part about 96." And I found the story very fascinating, but very funny and interesting at the same time. So as you can see, I'm the guy in a blue shirt right behind your mom,
Oh yeah.
right there right behind the wife. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
As much as I thought that they would be talking about you the whole time, but most of the people there were talking about your sister. I'll never forget that. Even like the directors and those people. And I'm not sure how well they knew your sister, but I do remember constantly your sister was brought up.
Oh,
And
yeah, and actually, I'm happy to hear that because it's, you know, it it really the story obviously came through me, but it wasn't just about me, and she was a huge part of my story, my life, and so I'm glad to hear that that she was a topic of conversation because that's for me it was a big part to let people know how important she was in my life.
would you say that in the movie, the depiction of your sister, the interactions between you and your sister, sentences, statements, was really portrayed right, or were there things missing?
No, actually, they did a pretty good job of that. I was happy with the things between my sister and myself, my father and myself. They took some liberties with other things that I wasn't crazy about, but also the skating parts for me were it was hard to it was a little bit unrealistic because they shot it on short track, an indoor hockey rink, and obviously I did long track. But that might have been from my perspective because it's my whole life. Maybe people who watching don't know the difference, but for me that was for me and a lot of skaters that was a obvious part that was a little off.
It was tough getting a copy of your movie. I tell you, I spent like a week trying to get it, pulling favors,
Did you?
even
Yeah.
calling a contact of Warner Bros. I says, "Bro, listen,
Yeah.
I need a movie from '96, man. I need to get a clip for Dan to make him laugh." So I ended up getting it 2 days ago. So I took out some clips to show you. But
Nice.
you brought up one thing about growing up. One of the questions I have for you, I know that you were brought up with a tremendous amount of siblings. I mean, more than I have. So that I believe 9 in total. Is this correct? Or
Right. Yeah, I was number 9 of 9.
so what was that like growing up with so many different kids in a household on a two-person budget in those times, in those years, and here you are trying to be an Olympian?
You know, um, for me, it's like it's all I knew, and so I just wouldn't trade it for anything. It was great having so many brothers and sisters. For me, it was fun being the youngest. It actually helped, I think, in terms of my competition career because as I grew up, I always, I never thought that I couldn't do something that my brother and sisters were doing. It didn't matter if I was 5 or 10 years younger than some of them. I thought I could be as good as they could be. And they never told me I couldn't. And so when I got to, I think it's one of the reasons, speaking of Sarajevo, I'm 18. I think I was the youngest competitor in the field. I wasn't intimidated. I was excited to see some of these skaters that I had known of for so many years, but I thought, well, why not? I can do this just as good as they can, and I think it was a good jumpstart to my career.
Hmm, very interesting. Yes, I mean, having a father figure as a dominant type of personality, police officer, we've got plenty in our family. So I knew that
Mm.
that helped me as an athlete growing up. So I wanted to ask you the same question. Now, I know you mentioned one time that it is your sister, Jane, that got you eventually into speed skating. Is this correct? And why would she get you into the sport that, let's say, she was passionate about? Is this something you guys did together, or what's the story there?
Yeah, getting into it, I could say, was kind of all my whole family because they skate, all of them skated at some point before I did, and so it was just a family thing. It was something we did. We were always doing things together. We were traveling to and from skating meets. And as I started to improve, as I started to get better, she was the one who always kind of had a way of making me believe that I was good enough, that I could take this to to another level. Just by the, some of the things she would say to me, oh, when you become world champion, blah, blah, blah. And this, I'm 14 at this time. I had no, so, but just the way she said it gave me a lot of confidence and thought, become world champion.
That's correct. Yes. And not only are you a world champion or gold medalist, but also you became a Hall of Famer of United States Hall of Fame. You became that in 2004, from my understand. How did that
Yeah.
happen?
So that's voted on by athletes who are already in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame and journalists and so forth. And also the public gets a vote. So that was quite an honor for me to, because when you look and walk through the halls and see some of the names, I mean, I was a huge Olympic fan from the time, I remember really watching my first games, very closely in probably 1972. So I was 7 years old. But, I don't know if a lot of other 7-year-olds were watching, but I was glued to the TV and I always loved the Olympic Games. And then when it became, sort of a dream for me and then turned into a reality, it was amazing kind of to be living this life that I wanted when I was very young. And then, of course, as you say, to be elected to the Hall of Fame, and then back to the names of that came before me is just a huge honor. And to see my name up there with some of those is still kind of hard to believe, but it's amazing.
So whose idea was it to even make a movie about you? Whose idea was it? Is this something you were proposed? The director, I do know, he's from here. He's from like
Mm,
Kleinburg area, and he does a lot of
really?
Canadian movies. Great guy. What was the entire story behind Let's Make a Movie about Dan?
Yeah, it's a good question, but there were a few offers that came our way uh, after I won in '94. We did a book, and then there were two or three different offers to make a movie. And luckily I had an agent at the time, so I didn't have to deal with a a lot of that stuff because I had no idea what I was doing. Or as as a as an athlete, you're concentrating on what you have to do. And then that's why we hire other people to do those things, because they can take care of that. So I don't know, other than I do know there were two, maybe three, possibly even four different offers to make the movie.
Anything else coming up as far as a revised version of Dan Jansen story?
Not that I know of. I don't think people are quite as interested these days, but it would be fun. Actually, there had been talk. I'd say as recently as the last 4 years or so, somebody mentioned it and said should bring it back, because it's with like the movie Miracle with the U.S. hockey team. That was done 20, 25 years after the fact or so, something. And so the lessons still remain in terms of my story and so forth, but that's not for me to decide.
So would you decide then that to agree with what people say, that you are probably one of the best or top 500-meter speed skaters of all time?
I'm never one to toot my own horn, but I would say I could be put in that category, for different reasons. So times change, right? I mean, with the collapse skate, it's totally different in terms of the speeds they can go, and that is a technological advance in the sport that we didn't have. Having said that, I think a good measure is, when you want to compare different athletes from different eras, is the certain athletes in any sport have kind of taken it to a level that hadn't been there before. And I think I can say that I did that with the 500 meters. I set the world record in that race probably 5 times, but also not only that, but I broke a barrier. So back then it was 36 seconds. 36 flat was sort of the untouchable, and that was one of the things I had a dream of doing, is breaking 36 seconds, and was even kind of laughed at when I said it, because we were a good almost a half second off that pace at the time. And I did that. I did it 4 times actually, and before I retired. And but at the Olympics in '94, I was the only one who had skated under 36. And so, that's I guess taking it to a different level. And so I guess I could hopefully put myself at least in that small group near the top.
Was this it? Were you looking to get the medal at any cost, whatever it cost you? And I'm sure you sacrificed many things, and you got it. Is this the reason why you retired shortly after?
It is. That was 4 Olympics, and it's really hard. Getting to the top is not even the hard part. It's staying there. And I was at the top in my sport for quite a few years, and was able to stay there. The fun part for me was the 500 meters was my best event, and I was the best in the world at that event for a long time. But the 1,000 meters was not. Until the last couple of years, I really worked hard physically, mentally to improve, and more so a mindset. I knew I was capable physically of skating 1,000 meters, but it's how you feel about that race. And I wanted to feel about that race the way I felt about the 500 when I went to the line. I always knew it's a hard race, as it's tiring. It's a sprint for 1,000 meters. Think about going all out for over a minute. Eventually, your power meter starts to go down, you get tired. But so for me, it just became a mental thing. Finally, I started to believe in myself in that race. And then, as it turned out, that was my last chance, because I slipped in the 500. So, to not only to win gold in there, but in that race, but to set a world record was pretty special and a great way to finish. And then back to your question. Yeah, by that point, there really wasn't anything else I could accomplish. And so I felt like if I was to go on, I don't think I would have wanted to go another 4 years. The thing that tempted me was the following year. So '95, the World Championships were held back in Milwaukee, where I'm, my hometown. And so would have been fun to finish out there. But
With your sister last. And before you got on the ice to skate, would you be able to tell us, the audience, how did that feel like? How down were you? And how did you pick yourself back up? I mean, you got a phone call that your sister is dying. You had a pleasure and a last time opportunity to even speak with her. I mean, that's an honor. That is incredible. And
yeah,
I understand, based on your previous interviews, what you said to her. I understand, based on the statement of her former husband, how he expressed that. But what did you feel on the inside, Dan? I mean, you must have been dying. How did this feel?
yeah, it was a brutal day. So, just taking a step back. So going back literally 1 week, as I said, that the World Championships, thank God, were just by coincidence held in Milwaukee, the week before the Olympic Games in Calgary. And I won that meet, the World Championship, and then went directly to the hospital. Jane was in the hospital, and I knew she had come out of remission, so she wasn't doing well. But it was just like, all right, we spent our time, and then when I left the hospital, I felt like, I'm going to go to the Olympics in February. Then we'll finish the season, go back for the World Cup races back to Europe. We're done in March, right? So when I left, I'm like, okay, I love you. I'll see you in March when I get back. Literally 7 days later, she was gone. And so I was in Calgary. Now it's race day, 500 meters. It's Valentine's Day. It's, February 14th. And got a call. The race wasn't until 5 p.m. because it was, prime time for American television. And I got a call. It was maybe 6 a.m. and they're knocking on our door in the Olympic Village. And I kind of knew right then, because nobody's going to wake you up at that hour on your race day at the Olympics just to wish you luck or who knows what. So I remember going to the phone, literally just kind of shaking and so nervous. And yeah, and then my mom said, she's not going to make it through the day. And, we just want you to have a chance to say goodbye. And so I did that. And I was very, very thankful to be able to do it. Having said that, then I hang up and I've got all day. I don't even know if I should be there. I'm feeling a little guilty that I'm not there with her, that half of my family is with me, and I'm thinking, well, they'd probably rather be home. Now I got to go skate a race. And it was, can you imagine, you're at the Olympic Games, you're favored now for a gold medal, and you're thinking you probably shouldn't even be there, and kind of feeling guilty about being there. And so that is not a good way to go into any race mentally, and so I just kind of felt like, all right, I'll go through the motions. I've raced 500 meters, 1,000 times in my life. I'm just going to go do it. And when I got out there from the day before, literally I got off the ice the night before, I felt so good. After winning the Worlds, I was confident, felt great on the ice. And I felt like there's no way anybody's going to beat me tomorrow. And now I get on the ice for warm up before the race, and I couldn't keep my skates underneath me. They were just wobbly, and it was like I had somebody else's legs and somebody else's skates on. And so then I kind of, again, I was just like, just see what happens. There was no mental prep at all. And so, as we know, it showed. Like 100 meters in, first stroke into the first turn, I fell. So, it says a lot about being there all in, mentally, physically. You have to be there. And when something like that happens, at least for me, I just wasn't able to put it together and go out there and do what I needed to do.
Or another alternative way to look at it is that Jane was there with you in a soul form.
Well, I believe that, and I believe she still is in a lot of ways, and but that's all stuff that gets, I guess you do shows about it, but for me, it's just a personal thing, and it's how you feel about it, and but again, she'll always be with me in her way and in my way.
Do you believe in incarnation yourself?
Don't know. I really don't know. I haven't thought too much about it, and I don't know if it's for me to decide on that one.
Yeah, no, for sure. Many people are unsure. Some say yes, some say no. Some, due to religious practice, they would say, well, I'm not really sure. We go here, we go there. Definitely, that's something I wanted to ask is, where do you think you'll go after you pass?
There again, I hope I go to heaven. It's all, the religion's a tough one. There's so many different beliefs out there. And for me, I grew up as a Catholic because, there's another reason, I guess I'm number 9 of 9 kids, right? But, but again, I think it's all kind of personal, and I have my own personal relationship with God and my beliefs. And I've never been, and I don't have a problem with when it happens, but it's never been my style to, for instance, post race, after a race, be on camera and, thank Jesus Christ, and I can do that on my own. I don't feel the need to do that publicly. Some do, and that's okay. That's just me.
That's a very good perspective. I'm going to have to align with that perspective. My perspective, to be very polite and all due respect to everyone, whatever religion that you practice wonderfully or beautifully, or you're trying to practice, I really don't think there's a need for you to kind of push that on a microphone on stage when you have 20 seconds or 10 seconds to say your story. How about you just tell me that you're glad you got the gold award, and I'm going to like you more. I don't need to hear about your religion. And I'm not saying that I'm territorial. I'm not religious. I was also brought up Christian Orthodox. But what I'm saying is, I do see that a lot on the athletes today. Immediately, like before they can even say thank you, thanks to the audience, thanks coach, thanks to the managers. No, it's like they will recite you an entire verse from the book that they read, and that's it. And the reporter's like, okay, well now we have John Smith here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I also think that's a little tacky. But another thing you brought up a point, which I agree with as well, is that you don't need someone to take you to God. You don't need someone to take you to spirit world. You don't need someone to take to your star family or galactic guides, whatever you believe in. It's within you. You have the
Yeah.
power. So yeah, I have my own personal relationship, as you said, with the
Yeah.
higher density beings and so forth. I don't need anyone to tell me that. I do agree with that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mm.
So I guess let me ask you one more question. I know it's not your cup of tea, but I have to ask is, do you believe in UFOs?
That's another one. Well, the technical term, yeah, because I think there's a lot of unidentified flying objects. Do I believe in aliens? Maybe is a better question. I do believe that we are a tiny, 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 minuscule part of maybe many universes, right? If you know astronomy and all the things. So it would be hard for us to be the only, intelligent beings in this world. It would almost, it seems crazy to believe that, but it's also strange that if it is, if there are others out there, that why not, come together? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Why don't we go for a golfing game? I mean, Dan's
Yeah,
going to be
right.
there.
Go play 18 holes
Yes.
somewhere and talk about
It's
it.
refreshing to see a person that was brought up traditionally, such as yourself, in a loving family. I've seen much material about you. I know a little bit more about you than you think I do, and it's refreshing to see that you have an open mind when it comes
Mm,
to ships or crafts or UFOs, whatever terminology it is. That we discuss a lot of UFO talk on this channel, right? So this is why I wanted to
mm,
ask you, but I that
mm,
certainly will agree very firmly that a lot of the ships that are authentic, not some drone or a bird or a passenger sky plane, but I don't think they live here. They're certainly from different interdimensional type of places and so forth. And I don't think we're ever going to get together. Their species, our
mm.
species, it's not meant to get together. And we're here in our
Yeah.
world doing our thing, having fun, golfing, speed
Mm,
skating, and hanging out on chit chats and these Friday
mm.
mornings like we are right now.
Yeah.
And speaking of golfing, I know that your wife now, Karen, is it Karen? Yes,
Yeah.
Karen. Yeah, she's a pro golfer, Nike sponsored athlete, has her own business. I read about her, and is this obviously the reason why you got into golfing? But what do you find so interesting about golfing? I've heard you make statements about golfing. I've seen you pictures on golf courses, creating a lot of events, charity events for your own
Mm,
foundation, which we can get into in a
yeah.
second. Why do you love golfing so much? How do you feel when you're golfing versus speed skating? What's the different
So
feelings?
obviously there's not really the physical correlation in terms of, skating is just really difficult in the physical side of it. But there are similarities, and I think what I'm attracted to about it is the individuality of it, and that, as in skating, look, you're out there, it's all you. You don't have, 10 other guys like, in football, or, 8 others in baseball, or 4 others in basketball, whatever it may be, that if you make a mistake, sometimes it goes unnoticed because they're right there. They'll pick it up, and nobody even knows. In skating and golf, if you make a mistake, you're gonna know, and everybody's gonna know. And I kind of like that. Not that I don't like team sports, because I think teamwork is an aspect of everything we do, no matter how individual our sports are. But I like that. I've always been sort of a loner in that, in terms of sport. I like to go out and work. Like when I was training for skating, it was great to have teammates to train with, but I had no problem, in the summertime going out. It's 100 degrees, and and working and by myself, and just, plodding through it, because I would think of my competitors, wherever they were in Russia or Germany, or, think about what they might be doing at that moment. And so I liked to be alone and to work through things by myself. And golf is a bit that way too.
Yes, I've been golfing for about 4 or 5 years, and I'm learned that. I had a golf coach and everything, so he shared
Mm.
similar things as you said. Speaking of advice, when it comes to younger athletes trying to follow your path, follow other Olympians' path, I mean, you're a gold medalist, and without giving me an answer you would give perhaps, somewhere on TV, I'm asking you as a human to human, what would you give? What kind of advice would you give to a younger athlete that truly wishes to go to Olympics, win championships, tour, follow that lifestyle as you did? What would you tell them? What to do, what not to do?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it varies these days because of, here's another term that we never even heard of really back, even when I was competing, is mental health, right? And so you have to be a little careful in how you even coach kids and athletes and these days because of some of those things. Now, I'm not saying they're not real, because they're absolutely real, but um, unfortunately, I think back then sometimes it was just suck it up and get out there and do it, and so that whole part is different. But my advice wouldn't change, and it is really about loving what you do. Like, as cliche as it is, and I'll say this, whether it's this show or a nationally televised show, it's like the journey, especially in my case, the journey was much more important than the end result. Because, I mean, look, I am super thankful that my story turned out the way it did, and that I won in the end. And but man, when I look back, it's there's so many more important things that I did, that I learned along the way, than than just from winning at the end. I probably learned more from the tough times than I did from winning. And so, to back to that original question, you've got to love what you do, because if you don't love what you do, if it seems like work every day, it's work, and don't get me wrong, but I never, not to say I never, because there's days you don't want to get up and go run up a mountain. But there was always like a challenge for me, and that was every day, that made it somehow fun, even when you put your body in through things that nobody should go through. You're an athlete, how it is to work through things, to work through pain, all of those things. But that has, in some crazy way, that has to be fun. And for me, it was maybe more fun, the lifestyle of it. I got to, from 16 years old, I got to live in Europe for 3-4 months a year, and did his best, because that's really all you can do in the end. And then, as a person, would be her treatment. It had to be in Seattle. Well, we have a family in Wisconsin, and so my mom and dad lived there for a year. I was out back and forth a bunch, and a lot of my family was as well. And I learned about the non-medical expenses that families go through, let alone all the treatment. But living, travel, food, and some parents have to quit their jobs to be with their children, and so we help families like that. And it's been rewarding. And so I hope, even when I pass, that my daughters can carry this on, and it's really a legacy for my sister, not so much for me. But I was in a position to be able to start it and to continue it, so it's really all about her.
Wonderful. I know that your foundation that you started in 1995, the Dan Jansen Foundation, and I obviously understood it is because of your sister. I spoke recently to a leukemia patient, because one of the businesses I own in Toronto services a particular location that has to do with certain cancer patients. And I don't know what I wish to discuss publicly what line of work I'm in, but I was there, and I asked her a question if she knew about you. She didn't, but I expressed her that you started a foundation a long time ago, and this woman cried.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't get into any details. I did not speak of your sister. I didn't get into anything. She cried. And I asked her, may I ask you why you're crying? And she says that because there's people out there that care. And that was
Hmm.
touching, to be honest with you. I went back into my SUV and I sat there for like 10 minutes, maybe a little more. I don't even know. There was a loss of time. And I just thought about life and how
Yeah.
grateful and just how grateful I am for everything that I have. And I'm fortunate to say that. And this poor lady, I don't know her age, was just sitting there. And she was touched the fact that I said, there's a guy named Dan Jansen who
Hmm.
has a foundation. She knows nothing about you. But the thing is that she
Yeah.
was touched that someone cares. And that really resonates when you were just talking about the amount of people that your foundation has helped. And I went through the site and I thought it was a beautiful website, the Dan Jansen Foundation, which we're going to obviously place links to in this video and at the end. And it'd be a wonderful thing to even dedicate this entire episode to Jane. And it's a
Yeah.
great story, beautiful, lovely story. And thank you for sharing all of that. And I don't mean to go into the past, to dig up,
No, hey, that's okay.
the wounds,
Uh,
right?
I just add, and I thank you for saying that. But it's, I think about that a lot because we literally, I probably they come across about three of us kind of we get applications, right? And we help from a couple of hospitals that we're affiliated with, that the social workers find these families for us. And then they fill out an application and we thank God we get to say yes to just about every single one. I'm not sure we've had to say no yet, but my point is just what you're saying is that I know that, especially now as we get older, probably 80-90% of these families, they don't even know who I am, and it's totally okay, and it's great. In fact, it's great. Like that's not what it's about. It's not about me, but somehow from all this whole story we've talked about, my story and my sister's story, there are families out there who will never know my story or what I did or my sister's story, but they're going to be helped from it. And so I can look 30 years later and say, look at these families. There's some good that came out of this.
And another thing that your foundation assists, I was reading that you also have a scholarship fund for children or for young students. But you
Mm-hmm.
also have Kids for Young or Kids Are Gold, which is another type of support avenue. Well, why did
Yeah.
you start both of those? And how did that come from the original concept of the Dan Jansen Foundation?
Yeah, because we wanted it to be, obviously to help and be cancer related, but also just to help others. And so the high school scholarships that we give out are really based on certainly financial need, but also what we term as the Dan Jansen outlook on life. And so they write their applications and they write their stories, and they're just unbelievable. They're beautifully written. They're smart, and the things you mentioned how thankful we are for what we have. That's what I do. I sit there and read these things, and I go, "Wow, I haven't been through anything compared to what this kid's going through." Whether they lost a parent or sometimes two parents or who knows what, and they live on like $3,000 a year or something crazy, and you just go, please, I wish I had more to give to you. But, this is all we have. We're not a big foundation, but those types of things. And so we wanted to help them. And then also I wanted to give back to my sport. So we help with, donate to US speed skating and also some individuals, and then the kids, kind of a grassroots program that they run in Milwaukee. So we're trying to, with our funds, our limited funds, we try to do as much as we can.
If you were to have one message to all of the patients of cancer and leukemia that would ever come across this episode, what would be a short message you wish to tell these beautiful individuals?
I would tell them, have faith for one. You can't, so don't give up. Even though, Jane's fight ended the way it did, she was always the light in our lives. I always thought, God gives things to people who can handle it, and I don't know that I or anyone else in my family could have handled what she went through the way she did. And Again, just there is hope, and there's always hope, so never give up. But also, um, you know, somehow try to find a way to help others along your journey, even if right now you're the one who needs help, but there's always going to be others who need help too. So just try to keep that in mind.
So you have two daughters, and if one of them came to you, I know one of them's involved with the Dan Jansen Foundation, but if one comes to you with tears and says, Dad, this is not about a heartbreak, but I just need empowerment. I feel lost. I feel weak. I'm not sure what I wish to do. I'm just not empowered, Father. Please tell me, what do I need to do? What would be a few sentences you would tell a young daughter or someone's daughter or your own daughter on empowerment,
Yeah.
human empowerment?
I mean, that gets that gets tough too in terms of, look, again, my own thoughts versus the medical field thoughts, or people come and say, oh, you're no doctor, so stick to your own thing. But that doesn't mean I can't share opinions with my own daughters, and nobody can tell me not to do that. And for me, again, with my girls, it's just about life changes as you go, and there are times when you think it's there's everything's wrong and nothing could get better. But man, life is, we say life is short, and it is, but life's also pretty long. And if you think about all the phases we go through in life, the ups, the downs, the happiness, the sadness, all of it, it does come and go. And the happiness and the good is so much better than the other side. And nobody knows when and the ebbs and flows of one's life, and when the ups come and when the downs come. But my mom always, she was always a great example of, you can't, there are, a lot of things. Look, there are certain things in life we can control, but there are so many things we can't, we have no control over. And those are the things that you have to accept. You have to accept it, because what else do you do, right? You have to accept it, learn from it, and move on. And that is one thing I will never forget that she taught me.
Speaking of wise advice, what would be one advice your father gave you that you would remember to this day?
So my dad was always so he was so like good in his ways of honesty and his ways of. So for me, from my dad, it was always about I kind of wanted to make him proud, but not with my result as much as. So my dad told me one time, what, I want to see, at the end of a race or a competition, he goes, there are times I would like to see you and not even know if you won or if you lost. He said, you should be thankful, for the opportunity. You should be thankful for your competitors. You should, if you get beat, you look them in the eye and you shake their hand. And those are things that are so true, because again, and as we get older, you realize, I'm all for being competitive and wanting to win and all of that. But in the end, everybody is out there doing the best they can. And so, 50 years down the road, nobody really cares if you won or lost something. But I will, I know, and I'm very confident in my belief that my competitors will always look at me as, upstanding and honest, and, those types of qualities, rather than how fast I skated. That's
Right.
not really that important.
Absolutely, yes, of course. And I think your reputation clearly speaks for itself online and amongst the industry, not just with the Olympians, but golfers and foundations and many things. And I've read many reviews about you, and yeah, everyone has tremendous amount of respect for you, and they've constantly called you a gentleman, a class act, and I will agree with that. You do have that honor, you do have that integrity, absolutely, and that's wonderful to see these days. You haven't changed.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And I'll leave you with one question. When it comes to your public speaking, aside from the business perspective, what would be the overall message that you relay, that you put forward, that you forward to your audience, that when they leave, you want them to remember what you said, that would change their life?
I don't want to be redundant and repeat myself, but it truly is. When I speak, I share my story, and I share a lot of lessons from, from when I fell and Jane passed to when I won, and all the different Olympics and non-Olympic things that I learned, and a lot from my father. But I think I kind of, touched a little bit on the fact of that it's, you might be 22, 25, 20, whatever age you are at that time. And your perspective is so much different right now than it's going to be. Trust me, 30 years down the road, it just is. And again, it's good to be competitive because it pushes you to be your best, right? But that's really it. Be your best. Your best doesn't have to be the best. It can be, and hopefully it is. But if it's your best, that is great, because that I tell the guys, now, what athletes or really whomever, but I always say, look, you don't want to wake up in 25 years from now. You don't want to be that guy that said, well, yeah, I was this, but for whatever reason, I just, if it's injury or health related, that's one thing, but I could have done this, but blah, blah, blah. How many times do you hear that from old high school or whatever? I beat you when we were 16, well, great. but so my point is, be the guy in 25 years or woman that, that can wake up every morning and know that it was your best. And I don't care if your best was 50th place, that you didn't skip workouts because you didn't want to do them, or, you got through everything, you gave it your best, and then you can always look back, always, forever, and know that. And there's no better feeling.
You're absolutely correct. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for explaining that. And what are your thoughts for 2023? Not to predict the future, but what are your personal plans? What are some of the things that are exciting that you wish to share? 2023.
So I'll tell you what, right away in 2023, Olivia, my youngest daughter, is getting married. So I got that on the horizon. And Jane might not be too far to follow, but so my daughters are great, and they're in good hands, and they're doing well. Otherwise, I'm working, I'm training different athletes now, well, in a different sport, but it's also the same physical and the mental and the focus type of things. And I love what I'm doing. I've done a lot of different things through the years, but I ended up, I'm 57 now, and I ended up doing the thing I'm most passionate about. And that's another lesson, right? It's like, you can do other things that might make you more money, but they're not going to make you happier.
I do hope certainly that everything goes well with your 2023 plans. You, your wife, Karen, your daughters, Olivia and Jane, and many other things. And just a thought came into my head now. I said, if I knew that I'm going to be speaking with you today, I would have said that to the actor in 96 and say, hey, bud, guess what? 2023, me and Dan are going to have a chat about this movie.
How about that? Right.
That's great. Yeah. I do appreciate you being with us today here for the Canadian audience on the Canadian Awareness Podcast. It was wonderful to catch up with you. Even though you and I have never physically shook hands, I somehow have a feeling that we belong to the same oversoul, or somehow we know each other, maybe from previous lives. At least in my perspective, I've always had this wonderful, keen opinion on you, your dedication to the sport. I mean, the fact that you got that phone call, and I know what village you slept in, the 3-4-story village down south below in the city. I took an Airbnb there once, and all of the Olympians were there. Then you had to drag your bum all the way down to the top, to Zetra, where you competed and so forth. I mean, that was a marvelous story. That story, Dan, blew my mind. I think it's one of the greatest athlete story on human empowerment, how to show dedication and when to show it, and consistency and never giving up. And you're a lion, in my opinion.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. It was really a pleasure to speak with you, and hopefully we'll meet in person again, more rather than as an extra in the movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe next time I'll run into you in one of these audience, these sports, these places.
Yeah,
And
or I'll be extra in your movie. How's that?
yeah, maybe that's the truth. Well, I wish you all the best in 23, dear friend. You're a great human, and I thank you for being with us this evening.
All right, man. You got it. Thanks for having me.
And there we have Dan Jansen. Dan, thank you very much for being with us this evening. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and especially now since we've crossed paths 3 times in 1984, in 1996, and now at the end of 2022. And I hope we have that 4th time opportunity. Maybe this time we'll grab a drink or chit-chat in person and shake hands finally. Otherwise, for more information on Dan, please take a look at his website, djfoundation.org, and the rest of the Canadian Awareness family. Thank you very much for being with us here this evening. I very much appreciate your time, your energy. You could have been anywhere else, but you're with me, and I'm honored by that. Otherwise, we'll see you all in next week's episode of Canadian Awareness Podcast right here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Good night.